So for today's session, I'm going to play with the Croc elbow lever, both double arm and single arm. So in yoga, I think they call it a peacock position. So I'm going to play with that to start with to warm up, and then I'm going to go into single arm variations. And I'm going to also do that with middle splits and just sort of intertwine that training. And I'm going to see how I feel, because I did do handstand push-ups yesterday, but I'm going to see if I feel okay to do some pressing up into handstand and some lowering down into that croc position. So I'll run through how I teach that peacock position and then how to progress it slowly to the one arm croc position. Okay, now the double arm lever or peacock position is quite a simple movement to get. Basically, we just want to think about bringing the elbows in towards the hips. Now you notice if I externally rotate, even if I take the fingers all the way around down to the bottom, it's easier to bring my elbows together. If I'm here and I bring my fingers up higher, my elbows flare out. So bringing the elbows in creates that shelf to sit onto. So I would go somewhere between fully externally rotated or all the way backwards. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get my hip to be on top of my elbows and try and balance all of my weight onto my hands, take the weight out of the head and the feet. Now most people will need to take their knees out to the side to get them out of the way. So that should be pretty easy to get quite quickly. You can play around with the position in terms of how high you take your head, how high you take your hips. Think of that seesaw again. And then once you've found that balance point, we're just going to start to open up. So now when I open up, I need to take my head and my shoulders in one direction and my feet in the opposite direction, so we create balance across the seesaw. Now it's slightly easier if I straddle. If I do the same thing with a straight body and keep the legs together, you'll notice I'll protract more and I'll round and hunch more, which takes the shoulders and head down a little bit lower and makes it easier to counterbalance the legs being straight. Now, if you do struggle with this, or if you want a different variation, you can elevate the hands, which makes most of the arm balance positions a bit easier, because you create a little bit more clearance between the feet and the head. So it means you can like sag your body down and have your head or your feet below the base of support, which creates a much more stable position. Then I'm just going to rest in my middle splits. So again, I'm going to go as wide as I can with a closed hip and then trying to open the hip as much as possible. Now, if you need to with this one, if you can't get the torso upright, maybe raise the hands up onto some boxes or start a little bit higher. So now I'm just going to do it a little bit different, because I'm going to go towards the single arm version. I'm going to have my fingers out to the side, so a little bit wider this time, so shoulder width apart. And then I'm going to try and create that same position, so the seesaw effect, take the body into a straight position, but I'm going to try and take now the elbow towards the midline and the midline towards the elbow. So how I'm going to do that, I'm going to come up onto my toes and I'm just going to walk my body around, and I'm bending the elbow at the same time. So I'm trying to get my elbow towards the belly button. Now at this point now, before I rest onto my elbow, I'm going to tense my stomach. And notice there, the other thing I've done is I arch the body up. So it's like I'm bracing myself before I lay the elbow on top to stop the elbow sinking into my organs. And I want to have more like a convex, I think that's convex or concave position. So I'm going into an arch back position. So it's a bit stronger onto, I don't collapse and sag around the elbow. Then I'm going to just see whether I can balance. We're using the fingertip assist on the other hand and have the head and the feet off. If you struggle with this one, do exactly the same thing, but keep the feet on the floor. So here, I could do the same thing, keep the head on the floor but ideally we're aiming to get to that position. Obviously, once we've done one side, exactly the same. Now this is my weaker side, my dodgy shoulder. And then come back out. Okay, I'm now going to go back into the middle splits. This time with the middle splits, I'm going to start in the upright hip position, so open hip, upright torso, and go as low as I can. And then at the end of that, I'm going to close the hip. So the opposite way around to we done it last time. And I'm going to use something to put my hands on. So this is a good height for me, help me to keep that hip open. So roughly 30 seconds. Okay, then I'm going to close the hip where I can sink a little bit deeper. Okay, then I'm going to come back out. Now I am being a little bit more cautious around the splits today because on Monday I done heavy deadlifts and my body's not used to heavy deadlifts. I used to do it a lot, but since doing the body weight stuff, I don't do it as much now. So I don't feel sore, but I'm just taking it a little bit easier just in case. So now I'm going to go into some working sets of the croc or the elbow lever single arm. So I'm just going to aim for a 10-second hold. Now, if you're still working on that double one, go for a 10-second hold there. But if you're going to go for the single one, you have some options. So we have assistance, so we could use fingertips. So go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 on the fingers. Remember, if you are going 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 on the fingers, make sure that as you decrease the number of fingers, you're decreasing the weight in the hand. You're not just increasing the weight per finger. We don't want to have a super strong one finger. So same deal if you need to, going from that side to wind up the elbow into the correct position. If I'm doing the finger assist, I'll be like this. You can reach out, well, ideally there. And then the same on the other side. Now for the middle splits, I'm going to put my feet onto blocks because I find it a little bit easier to slide. Plus I like having the ability to go a little bit deeper because my hamstrings are quite long. My calves often touch the floor and restrict me. So I'm going to try and have that elevated surface, which will help me get a little bit of a dip below. I'm going to slide down. Like I say, I'm being cautious today, but I'm going to try and keep that open hip position for as long as I can on the way down and just see what happens. But if you're not ready for this sliding down version, you could do the sliding but have your hand up on a box, or just do the one we've done before where we slowly walk the feet down into a middle split position. Okay, then to progress the croc elbow lever or peacock position, I'm going to lower from handstand to it. Now I'm going to show the two-arm version lowering down to peacock. Now obviously here we need a prerequisite of having quite a strong handstand, probably a eccentric handstand push-up. And we also need to be a little bit careful. So whichever version of your Peacock or Croc version you've just been working on needs to be very strong because you're going to lower to that point now. So if you've been doing the one with the hands all the way back in the Peacock position, I'd probably recommend you start to train it with the hands turned a little bit more to the side or to the front slightly because it's easier to handstand and lower to that. Some people will lower into this position and rotate the hands as they come down. That is one option. I prefer to have not much change in the hands, so just a handstand with externally rotated fingers. Now that one could be done with straddle legs, so that would be slightly easier because it shortens the lever arm. and my hands were quite wide for that one, so I had to go into more of a strength position at the bottom. And now a couple of variations to lower down onto the single arm. You could go down into like a handstand push-up, so taking the head down straight onto the floor, then twist over on that final bit to find the croc. Or you can do what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to come down at a bit of an angle, so my handstand push-up comes down to an angle to find the elbow. So you can probably notice there when I lowered down onto the left side, I didn't hit that sweet spot for my croc, and I was a little bit off to one side, so I had to tilt the torso slightly to get the single arm balance at the bottom. And then to finish, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into middle splits. I'm going to go into a single arm croc from middle splits to the peacock position, so the double arm croc, and then I'm going to go over to the opposite side. So that was the session today. Let me know in the comments or send me a message if you have any questions. Thumbs up and subscribe will be appreciated, and I'll speak to you next time. Thanks, guys.